Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum.
Najashi, baby.
This is Steve teaching.
MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. Okay.
So I have to look right here.
A second. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
How is everybody?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, very good, very good, very good. Oh, okay, so you want to get in the frame? Go ahead.
I'm the one who said action.
Okay, all right. Alhamdulillah. You saw you on there, right? Okay, look at you see those faces together. When it comes to Najashi, Ubayd, you are the father. Unquestionably. Okay, go ahead upstairs, man. Give me a second.
Why can't I stay here and watch?
Cause if you're here, I want to be focusing on you, and I won't be thinking about what I'm gonna say.
Dad.
Go ahead, inshallah. I'll be up in a second. Inshallah. Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد ما شاء الله. We are in now the second 10 days of Ramadan, and I just wanted to leave the floor open for any questions, reflections, ideas. I'm teaching on Tuesday nights, and I'm also doing some different things with a few different organizations throughout the week. I'm hoping that this session can be more interactive, be more conversational. This is probably the most intelligent group, and I do not say that to all of the groups that I meet with. So I'm looking to learn something, hear something, but also be of assistance, be of service in any way that I might as well. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share? And if no one has anything, if it's one of those like Ubayd, it's just about 3 hours before, it's about an hour before iftar, 2 hours before iftar, and I don't have anything. I'm just hungry. Then of course I have some ideas myself. But I saw there was a question. Rana, can you ask me that question?
Sorry, I had to get off mute. Salam, can you speak about being pregnant during Ramadan? Are you supposed to make up the days?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yes, pregnancy. This is one of those issues in which the real world expertise of your physician, if the physician tells you it would be harmful to you or the child to fast, then you are not able to fast. In fact, many scholars would say that if your physician tells you it's harmful to you or the baby to fast, it's haram for you to fast. So no one should think that it's a display of heightened devotion or something like that to fast in spite of being pregnant. Yes, because pregnancy is a temporary situation, you should make up those days. The person that does not have to make up their fasting days is a person that is in a condition in which they cannot fast, and they never hope to ever not be in that condition. So someone that is diabetic, for instance, that has to take insulin and will probably be doing so for the rest of their life, this person wouldn't have to make up days. This person wouldn't even need to feed people as a result of missing those days. This would just be something that is not a part of their religious responsibility. But legally, in terms of Islamic law, a person who is pregnant, who isn't fasting, should make those days up. But it might take some time because nursing especially if you talk to your lactation consultant expert, sometimes milk levels, they reduce if one is not getting the requisite amount of nourishment. So a lot of nursing mothers also don't fast. And if you end up nursing for a couple of years, I mean, it could be, 3 years before you fast again. I mean, my wife has about 4 years in which she did not fast with both of our young children, the pregnancies, and then also the nursing. So it could take some time before you get back to fasting, but make sure to keep count of those days so that you can, make up the days when you return to fasting. In terms of spiritually, Ramadan is a time of heightened spirituality for all of us. Those who aren't fasting still experience that heightened level of awareness, attuneness, openness. Pregnancy is definitely a time of, spiritual, almost a kind of super sensory spiritual awareness that happens during pregnancy. So I would, as long as the energy is being directed in terms of towards reading the Quran, towards praying, where you're comfortable, of course. And don't, especially for like, if you attempt to pray Taraweeh, don't forget about the comfort and convenience of a nice chair. If, whenever I see like a pregnant woman standing in the sufuf, standing in the ranks, I'm like, you could make Taraweeh and just pull up a nice chair. So if you are praying Taraweeh on your own, or someone in your house is praying Taraweeh, a nice, comfortable chair. Ramadan still contains much for those who are fasting, just like it does for those who are fasting. I don't know if that answers the question. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And definitely Mubarak on the pregnancy. MashaAllah. Mubarak on the pregnancy. MashaAllah. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Questions, comments, ideas? We've already.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Samar, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, good. How are you doing? So it's Steve and I here. Steve has a question. We were talking about the Prophet, peace be upon him. What was his understanding about other religions before revelation? So was he exposed to Christianity, to Judaism prior to the revelation?
Yes. Islam is unique among, just because it's chronologically last, that it actually embraces both of those traditions as prophetic dispensations that were, of course, rooted in truth. And the Prophet ﷺ had more contact, personal contact, with the Jewish faith community in Medina, and kind of scattered throughout. There were certain aspects of the Jewish diaspora kind of scattered throughout Arabia, and he had less contact with the Christian community. You did have Christians in Yemen. They were Eastern Christians, really from the influence of the Ethiopian church. They were mostly populated, Najran, which is like an area around Yemen. And the Prophet ﷺ had exposure to those traditions, but he was not in any way learned in those traditions, which makes the revelation of the Quran all the more miraculous. He was not in any sense learned. He himself, kind of before revelation, espoused a very simple monotheism, a very basic monotheism, right? The Prophet ﷺ always eschewed idolatry, but he had no knowledge of like scripture and the prophets and the angels and kind of the basic tenets and precepts of Judaism or Christianity. Much of this that we find in the Quran, this was revelation to the Prophet ﷺ, which God mentions maybe 2 or 3 times in the Quran, that before this, you didn't even know what a book was. Not a literal book, but meaning revelation. It wasn't like the Prophet ﷺ was in any way aware or learned or adept at any of this. So no, I mean you did have some exposure, so that he knew of those traditions and communities, but he wasn't in any way learned in either of those traditions.
All right, thank you. Barakallah feek. That makes sense.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Freestyling today, man. Freestyling today, taking it easy. Other questions, ideas? Everybody is hungry. I know that because I'm hungry as well. MashaAllah.
All right, actually, we have another question if nobody else jumped in.
Okay, Bismillah.
So alhamdulillah, like in Ramadan, it's a great time. Like we can reconnect with the Quran and read it, and it makes us reflect about it in a way that maybe we haven't before. So if you can remind us, just like with the Quran, like the parts like Alif, Lam, Mim, or Ha, Mim, like those letters, I know I'm not sure exactly where it stands, but I know we don't really know the tafsir or the interpretation of them. But what's the wisdom, if you can speak to those aspects?
Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Those are called the huruf al-muqatta'ah, right? Huruf al-muqatta'ah. These muqatta'ah literally means disjointed, because these are, letters that are individually recited. And, there's much debate actually about whether or not they have meanings or whether or not they don't. There's nothing warid, there's nothing related, there's nothing definitive about the meaning of these letters. So most people are of the opinion that we don't know exactly what they mean, but they perhaps do have some meaning. They are representative of something. But then you have an opinion that they are just a part of the revelation of the Quran, and their wisdom is to remind us that the Quran is not simply a book of information, it's a book of inspiration. And this is something that I think those of us that are either born Arabic speakers, right, natiqun bil Arabiya, or those of us that are musta'arif, people that acquired the language, later on, we have to remember that the Quran is not just, it's not just a linguistic miracle. So that maybe if you have a pretty good grasp of Arabic and you can hear the verses recited and you're able to comprehend some of the meanings, don't think that in any way you have exhausted the possibility of the Quran, that you have exhausted the potential in those meanings. And I think the huruf al-muqatta'ah, these disjointed letters, they just remind us that, this is the speech of God. And while much of it does speak to situations, circumstances, realities that were confronted by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and then from that have relevance for everyone else, right? We say al-ibra bi-umum al-lafz wa laysa bi khusus al-sabab, that the lesson in the Quran is taken from what the words generally convey and not from the specificity of the circumstance that the verse was revealed to address in the life of the Prophet. So yes, certain parts of the Quran certainly speak with an immediacy in terms of their relevancy. However, there are certain aspects of the Quran that we are still learning about, we are still contemplating, things are still being uncovered. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, was acutely aware of this miraculous nature of the Quran. He would often say, "Balligh anni walau ayah," convey something about me, even if it's a single ayah. And then he would say, perhaps those being conveyed to will understand better than those doing the conveying. So the Quran is never exhausted. Our engagement with it is perpetual. And I think the huruf al-muqatta'a, alif, lam, mim, ha, mim, alif, lam, ra, kaf, ha, ayn, these, they remind us that this isn't just about information. This is also about inspiration. And, when we forget that and we kind of subject the Quran to this technocratic understanding of its content, right? Everything is technical. We forget that, for the vast majority of the ummah of the Prophet is non-Arabic speaking. The vast majority, only about, 10 to 13% of the ummah is Arabic speaking, right? The vast majority of Muslims don't speak the Arabic language. And yet Muslims everywhere esteem the recitation of the Quran. And many of them enjoy listening to it. And many of them speak to the benefit of just listening to the Quran, that it does something to me when I hear it, even if I'm not able to understand exactly what's being conveyed. And I'm reminded of the story I'm sure that I've told before of one of my friend's grandmothers, and she actually was Arabic speaking. She was an Iraqi woman, but she was an illiterate woman. And her practice was to get up every night, make wudu, open the mushaf, take her right index finger, run it over the lines of the mushaf, and each line that she ran her finger over, she would say, "This is true, this is true, this is true, this is true." And many people, not only my friend, but many people also in the family said that she was one of the most saintly, one of the most devout people any of them had ever encountered. And it was because she was inspired by the Quran in a way that perhaps she wasn't informed by the Quran. And the Quran is, now, which is not to say that the Quran is not for tadabbur, which is not to say that the Quran is not for reflection and contemplation and thinking, yes, we should be thinking about the Quran, but just to be inspired by it. One of the, unique phenomena of our time is kind of the proliferation of different forms of music. And you have people now deeply devoted to hip hop culture that do not speak English, but some of the energy being conveyed in the songs. People deeply devoted to rock and roll, American rock and roll, that do not speak English, but just to put on the musical track and to hear it, they are connecting with the energy. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess it depends on what they're listening to. But to recognize that the Quran is supposed to do the same thing, right? The Quran is supposed to do the same thing, that to cut it on and perhaps not be informed if you're not Arabic speaking, but it inspires me, right? Sometimes when I hear the Quran, even though, mashallah, some of it I'm able to grasp, sometimes the thing that blows me away most is its preservation. That whoever the reciter is, if I'm reciting, if someone else is reciting, Khalid is reciting, I'm thinking this is a scripture that has been recited in this very modality for more than 1400 years. That the way that Khalid is reading this, someone else read this in the same fashion over 1400 years ago. That just gives me chills. That just gives me chills. And that's not even, we can go back to, the Quran is the eternal, uncreated speech of God. But for me, just that human continuity, thinking, subhanAllah, that inspires me. So yeah, it's a very good question, Samar, about the huruf al-muqatta'a. And we have to remember to be inspired by the Quran, and Ramadan is the month of the Quran. And really, the Quran is perhaps the greatest expression of God's mercy, because God chose to make himself known. And of course, we use the term he just out of expediency. God is not male or female. God is beyond that. right? But God chose to make himself known and chose to show us how to worship him, right? And this is a great expression of mercy. So allow yourself to be inspired by that when you're listening to the Quran. Other things?
There is another question. It says, any tips or insights for the second 10 days of Ramadan focused on forgiveness?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think my message for the second 10 days is very similar to my message for the first 10. First, we're thinking about kind of that vertical component of forgiveness, that God forgives sins. And this is something that we should not forget. Every chapter, with the exception of one in the Quran, begins Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. And in this, Allah Ta'ala is giving you the lens through which you're supposed to see all of this. All of this should be seen through the lens of God's mercy, God's forgiveness. So the first tip would be plentiful in your istighfar, in asking for God's forgiveness. It's said that Allah only inspires a person to seek his forgiveness when he wants to forgive them, right? God only, the person that says astaghfirullah is only saying that because God wants to forgive them. But we should be consistent in saying astaghfirullah. The Prophet ﷺ is said to have, repented to God 70 times a day. And 70 in Arabic denotes an innumerable amount, right? Just always, always seeking the forgiveness of God. And the blessing of Ramadan is God is actually telling you that as you seek my forgiveness, I am forgiving you. I am forgiving you. I am forgiving you. However, I think what is more challenging, because I've been Muslim for over 20 years, and if there's anything I've heard emphasized in our classes, in our khutab, right, in our sermons, it's the forgiveness of Allah. Our ability to forgive each other and forgive ourselves. That is where I think we're struggling. We know that God is forgiving, right? We know that God is forgiving. Our ability to forgive is where I think we struggle. And, of course, the Prophet ﷺ said, forgive, right? Have mercy on people on earth, and God will have mercy on you. And forgiveness, as it's been said many times in our classes, is not something just for the other person. It's something for yourself, right? Becoming a more forgiving person. That should be all of our goal, this Ramadan, to become a more forgiving person. That if a person comes to you asking your forgiveness, that you would forgive them, and that you would be able to do it easily, right? That it wouldn't even be difficult. Now, of course, we're talking about forgiveness for slights, disappointments, mistakes. Forgiveness for major offenses, forgiveness for major harm is a process. It takes time. And you have to, forgive yourself for not being able to just forgive instantly, perhaps, right? But forgiveness for, for other people. And if you aren't able to forgive someone that perhaps has wronged you, that you would like to work toward forgiveness. And that in these second 10 days of Ramadan, you would be asking Allah to open your heart to the possibility of forgiveness, right? That, my grudges that I hold against other people are weighing me down. Would you guys just excuse me for 1 second? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This quarantine is tough on children. And today we actually went out to Algonquin and went for a hike, and still, man, there's some cabin fever. But asking Allah to open your heart to the possibility of forgiveness. So I would say both of those. You know, asking Allah to forgive us and asking Allah to make us more forgiving of others, inshallah. You know, in terms of the second 10 days of Ramadan.
All right, we have also another question. It says, we see that the women global leaders have been the most successful in protecting their populations in response to the COVID-19. And yet I was taught growing up that women are not allowed to be heads of state. Is this true? What is the wisdom?
Well, there's a hadith. There's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It mentions that whoever man walla amrahum ila al-imra'ati yafshal, أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. There's a hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام that mentions whoever places in charge, whatever nation places in charge of their affair, a woman will not prosper, will not succeed. Now, there's a few things that we have to note here. One is that when we are looking at anything in Deen, anything in Islam, it's never the case that a single hadith of the Prophet ﷺ or a single ayah of the Quran ends the story, right? When we say that a hadith is authentic, we're saying that on the basis of formal standards of authenticity, this hadith meets that criteria and can be included in a discussion about what the will of God is concerning a certain matter. Secondly, you did have Muslims in the past that disputed this hadith, most notably the Khawarij, which is interesting. You think about this group called the Khawarij, who were violently opposed to dissent. So that if someone dissented with the position that they had assumed was truth, that person's blood could be spilled. So this is no attempt to paint the Khawarij as like our exemplars, right? But the Khawarij said that the amr, right, the rule is for anyone who is obedient to Allah and has wara, is scrupulous in their religious dealing, man or woman. So my point in mentioning that is just to say that even people who claimed a very strong adherence to the outward implications or outward, meanings of the text, they did disagree about this. However, it is true that the vast majority of the scholars understood this to mean that women should not be absolute rulers, should not be absolute rulers or heads of state. Now, the reason for this, different reasons are given. I find a lot of the reasons given, quite frankly, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't give a reason. Most of the justifications that we would, read in classical texts, we would probably find them sexist and some of them downright misogynistic, just facts. However, me looking at this as, a modern and taking what the Prophet ﷺ said at face value, right? Let's take it at face value. And me trying to locate some potential wisdom in the statement. I think that, now look, you're gonna get me in trouble. But guess what? I'm at my house right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm at my house right now. I'm at home. So nobody can beat me up. Nobody can throw anything at me. So I feel at liberty to speak freely. Right. I think when we look at fields of endeavor, generally, we might dispute whether or not women and men are equal when it comes to, work in kind of civic spheres or work in the domestic sphere. We might debate that. We might, and I think on a case-by-case basis, you could certainly make a strong argument that men and women are largely equal in their ability to do most things outside the home. I'm talking every kind of, especially fields of endeavor that don't require physicality. So yes, I think it's proven that men are more effective laborers, right? Because men have more bodily prowess. If you're talking about, fields of endeavor that don't involve physical labor, I think men and women, we could argue that they could probably do them with the same level of effectiveness. However, and this is my own belief, if you talk about who brings more to the domestic sphere, I will submit openly that I just don't think I could do the job at the same level that my wife can do the job. I tried, and my wife would come. I'm sure she would attest to the fact that I participate, I make a contribution, but I think that she is psychically, but psychologically and spiritually connected to my children. After at least our youngest two, having carried them for 9 months, nursed them for 2 years, there is something that they get from her engagement with them. Now, we're both engaged with them, and I think mothers and fathers should be engaged with their children. But I do believe there is something that they get from her engagement with them that my engagement just would not be able to substitute, would not be able to, we're not exactly equal in that regard. She excels me. And I think that if you look at this hadith and we say that a woman being kind of head of state sets, a certain precedent about the kinds of activity that women engage in that is valued. I could see that precedent actually creating an imbalance in some way. And this is a critique that I have about kind of the modern two-income household generally. And my household is a two-income household, two people working, full-time, right? But I do think that in that, and we're trying our best to make it all work, we have challenges, right? Cost of living is a challenge. Self-definition is a challenge. I mean, I feel like my wife has the right to be realized in a way that she finds inspiring, in the same way that I think that I have a right to be actualized and realized in a way that I find inspiring. And we're trying our best. But I think many two-income households with people working full-time, there's a recognition that the real winner in this is capitalism. The real winner in this is kind of the GDP. So I would I guess I would say, looking at that hadith through a modern lens, I can see some wisdom there. I don't think that hadith in any way ends the discussion on women occupying positions of leadership. we're talking like heads of state. I think that's an open conversation, but I do see, if it becomes, a precedent that, both heads of household are working outside the home, and that becomes culturally something esteemed, something aspirational. I do think that could be dangerous for families. I do think that. I do think that. Now, what do you think? I want some feedback. The person who asked the question, what do you think?
Salam Sheikh, this is Ala. I'm the one who asked the question.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand what you're saying. It's kind of hard to internalize it as being a woman, right? And like if I were to Allah, have like a daughter at some point, to look her in the eye and be like, you're just as capable as a man, but you're not able to become head of state. That would be something that would be difficult for me to,
No, and that would be something difficult for me as well. I don't think, like it's kind of like what I think what, and I'm no expert on, I've never taken a formal course of study in gender studies, ever. But I do think that posing the question differently, what does it mean to be inherently better at something? Like, what does it mean? What does it mean for me? Okay, let's say like when modes of economic production were different, and people really made money with like manual labor. What did it mean for a man to be inherently more capable in that regard? Like, what does that mean? And I think, yes, if you're talking about like an individual woman being a head of state, yeah, I don't think that that's the same thing that we're talking about. I'm saying that, like, if you want to tell your daughter to she's just as capable as anyone, and to aspire to be president. And Bismillah, I'm not exactly talking about that in terms of your daughter, but if you have a daughter one day, right? I'm saying if a woman being head of state is taken to be a precedent, or taken to be something, is taken to be a model of sorts, meaning like this is an indication that these are the kinds of pursuits, right? This being the biggest and most visible public role, but these are the kinds of pursuits that are preoccupying and occupying the time, energy, talents, gifts, abilities of women, and inherently so of men. I think that could be that could produce some imbalance, is all I'm saying. And by the way, I just want to make it very clear, this is just me thinking out loud as a 21st century modern about this hadith, right?
Jazakallah khair. If I could, sorry, I don't want to monopolize, but does that have any bearing on, like, so I see what you're saying about the household imbalance, but if we extrapolate on that, then wouldn't that mean that women should not be working outside of the household in any significant capacity, if that's the wisdom behind it?
No, see, and this is the thing. It's almost like, and this is how I know that we look at it. We don't look at it the same way. See, we don't look at this with balance, and that's why I said sometimes I think capitalism is the real winner. If I think, like, for instance, culturally for us, it's the general expectation that a man is going to work outside of his household. That's the general expectation, that a man is going to work outside of his household. That his field of endeavor will be something that doesn't involve it will be something in addition to, but something outside of his household. Now, if you have a man that is just uniquely capable as a homemaker, and he's in the situation where his wife is maybe, the breadwinner and working outside the home, and he has this yani mohiba, he has this talent, he has this gift. I think all of us would say this is a situation that, yeah, I mean, you shouldn't, he should definitely be allowed to pursue. He has this gift, and he should be allowed to express that gift. But it would not change the precedent. It would not change the standard that we do expect men to work outside the home. It's the standard. But if a unique situation demands a unique response. However, I think the standard now is not becoming that, women will be more engaged with their children, but then you have those women that are just uniquely talented and gifted and should be allowed to make those contributions. No, it's the idea is now is that, both parties are expected to have their main theater of operation be something non-domestic. And then whatever happens to the domestic sphere just happens to it. Maybe they'll both try and, they'll like in my family, they'll both try to do as best they can to make it reach their ideal or what have you. But all I'm saying is that if it was just about people following their passions and gifts and talents, then yeah, of course, I think everyone should be allowed to do that. When you talk about this becoming the standard, and that's what I was saying, that is representative of, like, if a woman is head of state, I think that would be indicative of a cultural change altogether. And to some degree, I think that cultural change has already taken place. I mean, what do you think? I mean, not that there might be a few more questions, and maybe we can talk about this offline. This is a longer, lengthier discussion. And by the way, I just want to make clear that my own family structure, is a two-income, family, and my wife is a professional, and I think we do okay in terms of our household as well. But it's only because she still just is phenomenal and still shouldering, I think, the lion's share of the domestic responsibility and working full time. So I mean, that's why I think it works, because she's so good at what she does. But if she weren't, and I wasn't able to make more of a contribution just to make ends meet, I'm traveling all over, working all over. The only thing that would probably happen if my wife wasn't as phenomenal as she is that my children would suffer, and our harmony domestically would suffer.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Okay, Steve had another question. He's curious about what Sharia's stance on the young woman who was kidnapped into sex trafficking and killed her capturer or abuser. Would she still be charged with murder?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's a very good question that only Steve Mantooth could ask. I actually don't. I don't know. Are there any lawyers on how does that work in even in American criminal law? That would be a very difficult case to prosecute. Someone who kills their captor, illegal captor, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Bismillah. Other ideas, questions, comments? Me and Ala, we can keep going now, because I think this is interesting. I'm interested in her response as well.
I have a question.
Bismillah.
A follow-up question to the to this portion of the month about forgiveness. so it's one thing to seek forgiveness from Allah, and I was wondering, is there anything to having a practice of seeking forgiveness from people you might have hurt in the past during this portion of the month?
Yes, actually, this is something that wise people are careful to do often. It's just asking people's forgiveness, man. Even if you're not clear on how you might have wronged them, just saying, if I have wronged you in any way, that's a part of being, spiritually aware and conscientious. Just, if I've done anything, please forgive me. This is something that, in many Muslim cultures, on Eid, you'll find people saying, forgive me, please forgive me, samihni, right? Samihni, forgive me. If I've done anything, please forgive me. And this is a practice that we should keep up. And I'm trying to locate something in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and I don't. Nothing direct is coming to my mind. But many Muslims have instituted the practice of regularly seeking forgiveness, and this should be something that we do. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-dhulm dhulumatu yawm al-qiyamah," that wrongdoing, harm that you commit, this will be darkness for you on the day of judgment. So where you think that there might have been some potential, meaning like maybe I didn't intend to, but maybe the impact of my action was harmful or hurtful, it's best to just seek forgiveness. Just ask ask the person to forgive you. So even in my trying to look at this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and talking about its historical background and talking about how it's differed upon and talking about how our Sharia is not one in which one hadith closes the door of discussion about any particular point, but me just trying to look at this hadith and trying to maybe locate, some wisdom in it that resonates with me. Maybe I hurt someone's feelings. Maybe someone didn't like what I was saying. Maybe someone took exception to it. Maybe someone thought that it was in some way belittling or demeaning or limiting to women. I apologize for that. And, I ask you to forgive me. And it's just that simple. That wasn't my intent. But if that is what you took from what I was saying, then I ask of your forgiveness. And if I've said anything at any point that anybody took exception to, I ask you to forgive me. Right? I ask you to forgive me. Right? I ask you to forgive me. So that this isn't something that's held against me, on the day of judgment. And that's a prophetic way of being. Al-Muslimu man salim al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. The Muslim is the one from whom other Muslims are safe, from their hands and from their tongue. And sometimes we think, we hear those hadith and we think, oh, it's just about insulting people. No, maybe it's not just about insulting people. Maybe it's just about, how you talk about things you believe in that could hurt somebody, man. Maybe it's just the way you speak about, your politics, or the way you talk about the things you don't like. So we have to strive for that extra level of conscientiousness. And then the other part of that extra level of conscientiousness is putting a good construction on each other's behavior. That, somebody just using myself as a case study and what happened this afternoon, that I would hope that my brothers and my sisters would see me as someone that kind of understands why this would be disquieting, why this hadith would be disconcerting, especially in light of contemporary reality. Like, we see women doing a much more effective job as leaders, as world leaders, than men. And then me trying to have some integrity as a Muslim and saying, well, the hadith is sound. That doesn't close the case. But if I were to say, okay, the hadith is authentic, is there an understanding of this that is not offensive to women, not a disrespect to women, but that we can see some wisdom in it. And then I'm just trying to reconcile those things by thinking about it. And I would want you to see that just like you see me asking your forgiveness if I didn't do that effectively. And so, it goes both ways. We have to seek forgiveness and we have to be willing to forgive. We have to, ask to be forgiven, but we have to also put a good construction on what we see from our brothers and our sisters. That, if you see something, it's better to suggest that, the person probably didn't intend it in a hurtful way. Nonetheless, I was hurt by it, so I do forgive you. And inshallah, this is just what it means to be in community. So I don't know if that helps, Khalid.
Yeah, thank you so much. And would you mind reminding us just what are some conditions of seeking forgiveness? And also specifically in case it's something that's harm that was done to somebody else.
Well, the conditions of seeking forgiveness from Allah are, 4 conditions that I mentioned. The first of them is remorse, that you would feel some remorse. And you have to be careful not to allow remorse to become incapacitating. Remorse is, it's like someone said about salt. The right amount is good. Too much will ruin the meal. If you're too remorseful, that you're incapacitated, that you just feel, woe is me, God won't forgive me. What I did was so bad. And this is not good. This is not nedim. This is yets, right? This is actually despair. So I guess what I'm saying is that remorse is a feeling like, wow, in doing something wrong, I missed an opportunity to do something right. Got to come back and get them again. That's remorse. Despair is where it's like, God will never forgive me. This person will never forgive me. I'm so rude. I'm so callous. I'm so boorish. I'm so, that's despair. So the first condition is remorse, not despair. The second condition is stopping. You actually have to stop doing whatever it is you're doing. If one is kind of repenting as they're still engaging the action, it's not to say that is completely without value. It might be a mental reminder that you should repent. But if a person is asking God's forgiveness for abusing their spouse as they're abusing their spouse, that's not authentic. That's not nusuha. That's not real repentance. It might be a reminder to that person that what he's doing or what she's doing is wrong, but it does not really become repentance until they stop. The third condition is promising never to go back to the action, so that you don't make a tawbah muwaqqata, like a temporary, or like I'm making tawbah for this month, all throughout Ramadan, no dating throughout Ramadan, no sex before marriage throughout Ramadan, right? No clubbing in the month of Ramadan, no more weed, even from the dispensary throughout the month of Ramadan, no more wine in the month of Ramadan. But the first day of Shawwal, we lit, we back. That's not, now if a person is planning that, like, yeah, look, I'm gonna stop, but the first day of Eid, it's gonna be an Eid Mubarak. It's going down. That's not, real repentance entails never wanting to be disobedient in that way again. That's when the repentance is authentic. And then the last condition is, if you've wronged someone, mending the fence, setting right what was wronged. So it could be anything from paying somebody back if something was stolen from them. It could be asking their forgiveness if you spoke about them behind their back. It could be, asking their apology if you did something that was an affront to them in any way. But that's an essential condition of repentance. It's not enough just to ask that God forgive us. We also have to ask that, people, forgive us. Human beings have inherent value. It's not, you can't, I think it's beautiful that Allah is Allah, but you can't go above the person that you wronged, saying, well, I took it to God. And no, that person has a dignity. That person has rights that have been violated. And in the process of seeking God's forgiveness, you have to seek their forgiveness as well. Now, it's not always necessary to like detail every single solitary thing that you've done when asking that person's forgiveness. Sometimes it's wise just to say, if I've ever done anything, if I've ever done anything that could have in any way been interpreted as offensive, I ask that you forgive me. Right? You don't have to say, that one time when I was telling everybody how stingy you were. No, I mean, no need to enliven, past offenses that have died. It's best just to say, just forgive me, man. If I've ever had any slip in my discretion with regard to how I dealt with our friendship, our brotherhood, I ask that you forgive me for that. And inshallah, you'll find the person willing to forgive, inshallah. Does that help, Khalid?
Yes, thank you so much. Okay.
Alhamdulillah. Other things.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well, man. How are you?
Good, I'm good. I have a bit of an esoteric question.
I don't know if I can answer. Bismillah, go ahead.
So, I'm trying to reconcile my gratitude for remembering Allah, but in doing so, recognizing that having that gratitude is from Allah as well. So, I'm trying to understand where I am in the picture, and I understand that I'm taking the choice to do so, right? But how can I truly be thankful and content when even that is a gift and a blessing?
Man, this question of the way that you frame the question is so unique and so rare that some of the arguments that are mentioned in response to this question just wouldn't even apply to you, which is like, I've read hundreds of pages about this question, but it's always from the other angle. It's always from, how can I be held accountable for my sins if Allah decrees my actions, right? It's always that perspective. And a lot of, I think, very intuitive scholars, they always say, why don't the people ask, how can I be rewarded for my good deeds? In this case, your gratitude, if it's really from Allah. And one scholar said, the fact that you ask the question from the angle of evil, but you don't ask from the angle of good, is a proof in and of itself of something inherent to the human condition, that the good that comes to us, we feel deserving of it. Yes, we feel entitled to it. Yes. He said, no one ever says, why is Allah putting me in Jannah? Why would Allah put me in Jannah for good that he decreed that I would do? He said, no, they always ask, why would Allah put me in Jahannam? Why would Allah punish me for bad that I've done, that Allah decrees that I do? So you're actually asking this question from the opposite angle. Like, how can it be gratitude if God has inspired me with it? The answer, whether we're looking at it from the left side of the spectrum or the right side of the spectrum, is a mystery. Yes, in some way, we have kasb. We have a share in our action. We have a share in our action in some way that is not completely explainable, right? It's not completely explainable. And this is like, I've seen this written anywhere. I like to think about it as something that we feel. It's something that I feel, so that the bad that I do, I feel if I'm punished for it, I don't object to that. If someone takes me to task for something I've done wrong, I don't object to it. I don't feel that there's any injustice in that. I don't feel like, no, wait a minute, it was the qadr of Allah. What do you mean? Why did I hit your car? What do you mean? What do you mean? Where's my insurance information? It was the qadr of Allah. No, I acknowledge my share. And that's how the ulama, the mutakallimun, the theologians, they talk about it. There's a share that you have in it. There's a share that you have a kasb. You earn something from it. Kasb in English means like earnings, right? You earn, it's a mixed-up. You earn something from it. There's something in your action, good or bad, that belongs to you. And while that is certainly true, the fact that your actions are decreed by God, that is also certainly true. So in your gratitude, there is something that you earn from it. What that share is, how that share is, we can't explain. It's something we can feel, what that share that you have in what you do. And the fact that God decrees what you do, this is also absolutely true, right? Yes, you're right. God decreed your gratitude, and yet you are a truly grateful person. If you have that gratitude, you are grateful, and God decreed the gratitude. And those are two things that are simultaneously true. And where they intersect and how they interact is something that I think we are comfortable with at the level of feeling, but we end up getting jammed up when we attempt to explain. Like, wait, when we try to explain it, it makes for very convoluted explanation. But when we act on the level of our feeling about it, yes, I think most of us are comfortable with accountability. Most of us can feel the share that we have in our actions. I certainly can feel the share that I have in my actions. I can't say that anything that I've done that I didn't feel the free will to have done it or to have abstained from it. I feel it. Yeah, I feel it. It's something I feel. And my belief is that God is in complete control of this created order and decrees everything that takes place in it. So what you have in your gratitude is not complete ownership, because you're right. God decrees that gratitude for you, but you have a kasb. There's something that belongs to you. There's something that is yours in it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I didn't realize that my question that was a question really of free will. Now that I have it in that lens, it does definitely make more sense. I do have another question, but I don't want to hog time.
No, Bismillah, me and you talk. We talk, offline. But if someone else has a question, we can take that question. But dude, I just want to tell you, Najim, it proves I've always thought you a rare diamond, but you asked the question of free will, but it's like 1 in 100 people ask it from the other side. 99 people ask, wait, how can I be punished for this if it's the decree of God? But very rarely does a person say, how can I go to paradise for this if this is the decree of God? It's like the paradise part is like, oh yeah, I can take that. But the punishment part, no, I don't deserve that. Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar.
So the second question is related to our parents, and how to do right by them. Because the more I thought about it, it almost feels like time. Like it always feels like we're always in loss almost, and trying to do justice to what they've done for us, right? Like, the sleepless nights when your child is sick, the watching them for 12 hours straight, and now we're in quarantine with our parents, some of us, right? And like it's mind-boggling. Like, how can I ever get to the point of like being even able to say, hey, I've I've done a little bit of justice to them, you know?
You know what, man? I honestly, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim. I'm gonna be real honest right here, man. There was a, like a part of me, like when I guess I would call it like pop spirituality, like different, sayings and practices that are like in vogue. And, there's a part of me, I think because, I adhere to this 1400-year-old tradition, and there's all of this like precedent and, all this continuity. There's a part of me that's always a little suspicious of like those things, right? And so when I first heard people saying the phrase "pay it forward," I'm probably like, what the heck does that mean? What does that mean? What is that? That's just some old new age. Pay it forward. Don't pay it back. Pay it forward. Pay it forward. And I realized that for a long time, I didn't even know what it meant. Like, pay it forward. What does that mean? But I realized that what they were saying was that rather, like somebody would loan you something, like, right? Say $5. They say, don't pay it back, pay it forward. Meaning when you see someone in need of $5, just give them the $5 instead of giving it back to me. So it's like paying it forward. Keep it going. I think, yes, we are required to be good to, and now I love the term pay it forward, right? I've changed. When we are required to be good to our parents, but I think we should give up any hope of ever paying them back. Just where you are in relation to them, it'll never happen. It can't happen. Even if you care for your parents in their old age, it's not the same as them caring for you in your infancy. It's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, even if they require 24-hour attention and you are bathing them and you are helping them in the washroom, it's just not the same. Your delicateness and your vulnerability to literally death when you are an infant is not the same as their vulnerability to those same things in their old age. So while you can hope to be good to your parents, you can never really hope to pay them back. It's not the same. There's a hadith that illustrates this beautifully. There was a man, his mother wanted to make Hajj, and she could not walk. So he picked her up now this is an older woman. He picked her up and he put her on his shoulders, and he's making tawaf around the Kaaba. He's going around the Kaaba with his full grown elderly mother on his shoulders, carrying her. I think about how much I love my mother, and me putting my mother on my shoulders, making tawaf 7 times. I mean, there's a lot in that, man. It's like the physical burden of putting my mother on my shoulders, the physical exertion of making tawaf, and then the spiritual value of me facilitating this act for her. So a man comes to the Prophet and he's proud of himself. You get the sense that this guy was like, yeah, I'm really doing this. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, ahada birrul walidain? He said, Ya Rasulullah, is this what you mean by goodness to parents? Like, look, like how often do you see this? I have my elderly mother on my neck. So this must be what you mean by righteousness or birrul walidain, filial piety, goodness to parents. And the Prophet looked at him and said, La, hada insaf. No, that's just fairness. The man looked at him like with this bewildered and fairness. She used to carry you. Now you're carrying her. It's not the same. 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 So I would say doing as much as you can, recognizing that you'll never catch up. You'll never catch up. In terms of what they've given you, you'll never catch up. But then paying it forward. Just trying to be as good a parent to your children as your parents were to you. So I would say, trying to pay it forward. That look, those times where, when you have children one day, inshallah, and they're really, really frustrating you, thinking about the patience of your parents, that's paying it forward. Thinking about, sometimes, I mean, my son, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-azim, he can just talk, man. Just talk. And I just felt myself again. And then I think, I wonder where he got that from. Where could he have acquired such a quality? And then whenever I'm with my mother and my son's just going, I'm trying to engage every question. No, son. Yes, son. Well, I don't know, son. I mean, I don't know, son. What do you think, son? Oh, son. Oh, son. And I look at my mother like I'm frustrated. She looks back at me like, you better not. You better answer every single question. You better not show an ounce of frustration because you were 2 times worse. Okay? So pay it forward. Be as patient with my grandson as I was with you. So that my recommendation would be do as good as you can by your parents. Give up the hope of ever paying them back and just try to pay it forward, man, inshallah.
Inshallah. Beautiful answer. Inshallah.
I have 2 related questions. Coming back to the idea of like immersing yourself in the Quran, and also like that got me thinking of a time when. Let me back up. Can you talk a little bit about the riwayat of the different qira'at of the Quran, like the different recitations? Also,
yes.
Is there one that's like I'm essentially trying to treat you like Shazam for different pronunciations, where one that's more causing, and I don't have the name for it.
Bismillah. So you have 10 separate, I guess, variant modes of recitation of the Quran. And to understand why we have 10, you have to understand how, this was an oral culture and information was mostly conveyed orally. So if someone heard something from the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then they conveyed that what they heard, to another person, and they conveyed it to another person, and they conveyed it to another person, and that chain went back to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that would be sound, meaning it would be regarded as veracious. It would be regarded as authoritative, like that's a sound way of reciting that surah, or a sound way of reciting that verse. And you have 10 distinct modes that all go back to the Prophet ﷺ. Then you have some that are shad. They don't make it all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ, or the people that conveyed them, there's some issue with them, right? But you have 10 that are absolutely sound. Now, the most popular in the world now, actually, is, believe it or not, the most popular is Hafs. Most people think the most popular is Hafs is the one that most of us read, right? Hafs on Asim is the style that most of us read. Like I said, patience. I see you, son. That's nice, son. The one that most of us read is Hafs on Asim. Another style that is probably the second most popular is Warsh, right? Warsh is very popular. Warsh on Nafi' is very popular in North Africa, also popular in some places in sub-Saharan Africa. Then after that, you have Hamza, is another style that is very popular. Then you have Qalun, which is another style that is very popular. Then you have those are the only ones that come to my mind, I think, but I used to know all of them. SubhanAllah, Ismail, you jogged my memory. Now, you have these 10 variant styles. Now, when people ask me, how can you have 10 different variants of one recitation of the Prophet ﷺ? For years, man, I struggled with an answer. until I saw this thing called Lyrics Genius. This is where if you hear the lyrics of a song and you want to go on line and look at the lyrics, maybe see some interpretation of the meanings of the lyrics, you can go on Lyrics Genius, this website, and they have this for many different songs, R&B songs, hip hop songs, rock songs, right? Lyrics Genius, right? Now, what's interesting about Lyrics Genius is that when you're reading the lyrics, you see that people are transcribing the lyrics different ways. So maybe you heard something and someone else heard something completely different. And based on what they heard, they give an explanation based on what they heard, right? Right. That the Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran. And then people heard, it's only one recitation. It's one recitation. But each of those recitations go back to the Prophet ﷺ, right? They go back to him, alayhi salatu. And at least 7 of them, he himself heard and verified as being true. So there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which Umar heard somebody reciting the Quran in a way that was different than how he heard it from the Prophet ﷺ. And Umar, being the bold and intrepid person that he was, when he heard this variant recitation, he just grabbed the man by his neck. He grabbed him by the collar of his cloak and just started pulling the man. Like, this is subhanAllah. When they arrived to the Prophet ﷺ, Umar said, Ya Rasulullah, I heard this man corrupting the Quran. He was reciting the Quran with some different intonation or he's doing something different with the words. And the Prophet told the man to recite. And he told Umar, no, he heard it like that from me. No, that's how he heard it from me. You see? So, the recitation of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of the Quran is one. People's hearing it from him differ in some cases, but all of those go back to him. And it's just something that is a part of our history that, is not really debatable that this exists. I mean, some Muslims are very embarrassed by this. But this is something that, exists. And I think as long as you have people listening and then transcribing what they heard, that variance is always going to be there. Just go on lyrics, just go and look up the lyrics of any song that you know. And I guarantee you, although the song is one, the recording, and the other person listening to the recording is also listening to the same recording that you're listening to. But the way that they're transcribing it, you may say, no, that's not what I heard. And they may say, look at your version and say, no, that's not what I heard. You see, and that's just something that's going to be there. Does that help?
That helps. That's useful context. One thing, and this is just from Wikipedia from over the weekend, like it sounds like there's also some variation in because people heard it differently. There's also some variations from kind of the standard mushaf in terms of some word substitutions. Is that also something that you've heard of?
No, well, from what I've heard, and I've actually done a little bit of background research on this. The variance is based on like where certain dots would be placed in the mushaf, but that the actual text of the mushaf is the same in all of the different modes of recitation. There are some rare instances in which it's a completely different letter, but that's extremely rare, that a person heard like something completely different. So like I wish I had an example from the Quran, but I remember listening to a song, And a person made a reference to Clarence Avant, which was this music executive that I did not know about. Said something in real Clarence Avant, right? Real Clarence, and the guy's name is Clarence Avant. There's actually a Netflix special about Clarence Avant. But before I knew who Clarence Avant was, what I heard was, I don't know how I heard all of this, clairvoyant savant. Clairvoyant savant. I heard clairvoyant savant because I didn't know that there was a person named Clarence Savant. Yeah. Right. I heard clairvoyant savant. And then after I saw this documentary, I went back and I looked at those lyrics and it was Clarence Avant. And I listened to it and I heard it completely differently. So you do have that in the Quran where a person is listening to the recitation of the Prophet ﷺ, then conveying that to the person. And, you know, this is where hermeneutics becomes relevant. What you hear is going to be based on some of your own, I would say, pretextual understanding. So that someone who knew who Clarence Avant was, that's what they would have heard right away. Like, I know who that is. Someone who doesn't know who that is going to try and find a way to make the words intelligible based on what they know. Do you see what I'm saying? Where we're given confidence in the different qira'at is that all of them go back to the Prophet ﷺ, right? So all of these go, nobody is just engaged in their own free thinking activity. And if we really look at this, I think through the lens of faith, this actually proves the veracity of the Quran. It proves that all 10 modes are at the very least transcribing the lyrics of the same song. See, they're all transcribing the lyrics of the same song. And you can see that from their similarity. In the same way that there's a similarity between clairvoyant savant and Clarence Savant, that if he says one writes clairvoyant savant, the other one writes Clarence Avant, the fact that they are transcribing the same lyrics becomes very clear. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Other questions? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Well, we've reached about the point. I appreciate people coming. I mean, these, you know, it's tough because I know a lot of people also tune into the Tet-Leaf channel. I don't want to be, and we'll be talking about forgiveness tomorrow, inshallah. And I want to, this Monday group, this is where my heart is. And I want to always, you know, offer something not only useful, but something that you're not going to hear tomorrow too. And I know that last week, that's exactly what I did. I talked about Rahma on Monday, and then I came right back and talked about Rahma on Tuesday. And the Ramadan there's a bit of a time crunch in the Ramadan. So, you know, preparing something for every day becomes a little bit more challenging. But please be in touch with Ranna, in touch with Amina. If there are some suggestions, because at this point, you know, I have a lot of different platforms that I'm teaching on. So if there's a suggestion for Monday that kind of fits within the framework of Ramadan, I am completely open, you know. I am completely open, inshallah. I am completely open. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Look forward to seeing you soon, inshallah. You know, things are changing. Things are changing. Inshallah, we'll be back together soon. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.